It was October 6, 2017, just a few weeks out from Halloween. Elkton, Maryland. The witness, Ray Thompson, a pseudonym, was awakened from his slumber by a strange sound. It was 1:30 a.m. He assumed that somebody was attempting to break into his house, so he immediately reached over and opened his bedside drawer. There he kept a pistol, specifically for possible incidents like this. He climbed out of bed and walked to the bedroom door, readying himself to open it and confront whomever might be lurking around. Curiously, the moment he touched the doorknob, he was suddenly rendered unconscious. This would be the first of many strange things to follow. When Thompson woke up again, he found himself completely nude and inside some type of pill-shaped glass container. He was shivering and cold. As he looked around trying to make sense of where he was and what was going on, he noticed the lid of the container was open. He slowly climbed out of the container and stepped down onto the floor. He felt groggy, almost like he had been drugged. He was so out of it he could barely walk. He began to try to rationalize what was happening. He reasoned that somebody must have broken into his home, knocked him out, placed him into some kind of container for transport, and taken him to this location. It's the only thing that made sense. He realized that he was in great danger and began to urgently try and find an escape route. He examined the room. It was made of composite materials, namely concrete and plastic with fluorescent lights. He limped into a hallway that was tunnel-shaped, and there he observed a blue glow coming from down the hall. As he walked, he came out of the tunnel and entered a large cylindrical room lined with vehicles on hooks along the walls. The vehicles seemed to be mostly Japanese and German cars and motorcycles. Thompson also noticed some vehicles which appeared to once belong to the American military. In the center of the room was what looked like a metal tree that was 6 stories tall, with glowing blue leaves. But upon closer inspection, this tree was a large metal cylinder, and the leaves were capsules much like the one Thompson had woken up inside earlier. Except these still had people inside of them, and were radiating a neon blue glow. As he scanned further up the tree, he noticed several blue wires moving around in the dark area toward the ceiling. These 2 clumps of wires suddenly floated down toward him, and turned to reveal that they had faces in them, each with 2 large dark eyes and narrow slits for noses and mouths. Thompson found it was hard to describe, but the closest he could compare it to was a gray alien from popular culture. There was 3 of them. 1 was smiling and 2 were frowning. At this point, Thompson claims that he and the smiling entity exchanged words, and he employed a form of charades as he had trouble communicating what he was thinking. It is never made clear in the report if they spoke verbally or telepathically, only that it lasted about 10 minutes. Thompson was so exhausted, and the being he spoke to seemed far more advanced and of superior intellect, that nothing of value was shared between himself and the being. Soon after the exchange, Thompson passed out. When he woke this time, he was laying face down in a puddle of his own drool on a glass floor. He was too tired to get up, so he tilted his head up just enough to take a look around. The room was circular, about 150 square foot in size, and a bright, sterile white color. One of the tentacle creatures he had seen earlier was now in the room, but was busy facing away and operating a set of strange controls with no buttons or levers. Thompson laid his head back down, but saw through the glass floor that they had risen out of a deep black hole that was dug into a grassy plain. A rock-shaped lid closed around the hole to cover it as they flew further up. That is when Thompson realized that he was inside some type of a spacecraft, and they had actually been in a silo of some sort that was on Earth somewhere. He did not chance a guess where it might have been. Thompson passed out again. This time he was awoken to the sensation of being dropped back first onto his bed with a hard thud. He checked his phone and it read 6:30 a.m. Thompson filed this case with a mutual UFO network. It is unclear if an investigator with the agency ever followed up with him. It was April 23, 1965, 8 a.m., Rivesville, West Virginia. Mrs. Ivan Frederick had just finished getting her children off to school. Her husband had already left. He worked days at a local mine. She was standing at her kitchen window doing up the dishes from breakfast when she spotted what she thought was a child on the hillside pasture field above the house. As she stared, she suddenly became concerned that the child might actually try to climb over the electric cattle fence. She worried that he might be injured, and so she walked out to the front porch to get a better look and possibly warn him off. Now standing on the porch looking out over the pasture, her concern quickly shifted to amazement and then shock. A saucer-shaped aircraft hovered near the ground and then landed. Running downward from it through what appeared to be an elevator and a doorway ran a dark green-colored cable. Attached to the end of the cable by a connection at its stomach area was a small black or dark green-colored creature. It appeared to be more animal, or even, quote, satanic, than human. It was collecting grass and dirt and stuffing them into a small bag it carried, and it didn't seem to be aware of her observing it. The creature was unclothed, had pointed ears and a tail. It almost looked like an imp from European folklore. She could see no mouth or other facial characteristics, though it was only about 200 yards away. As she stood watching this play out, she suddenly became very frightened and eventually retreated back into the house. She did not call anybody nor try to flee on foot. In fact, her response to the situation seemed almost infantile. She went into her bedroom, crawled into her bed, and pulled the sheets over her head, covering her eyes. She noted that she lay there hoping it would go away. Speaking to investigators later, Frederick noted that the craft was about 10 feet in diameter and about 5 feet in height, not counting the stern or elevator, which was about the same height. It was cream and silver colored, with rows of windows or portholes underneath a dome or crystal canopy on the upper surface, which sparkled in the morning sun. The machine rotated in a clockwise direction while emitting a loud humming or buzzing sound. After about 15 minutes, Frederick worked up the nerve to get out of bed and returned to the kitchen, where she looked out the window. She hoped that the creature and the craft would be gone, but they were still there, though they appeared to be in the process of leaving. The creature stepped into the stern of the craft and disappeared inside. At that point, the craft then rotated faster, the buzzing sound got louder, and suddenly it rose, quote, like a feather, straight up at a view. When Jennings, the eldest son, came home from school, she immediately related the story. Despite it sounding fantastical, the eldest son immediately went out to the hillside to investigate. To his surprise, he found a depression in the ground, approximately where his mother said the stern of the craft had sat down. He estimated that the weight must have been more than a ton. Even stranger, he found claw-like tracks on the ground and in the dirt. Whatever creature made these, he estimated that it weighed no more than 45 pounds. He also found some hair samples in the footprints. It was at this point Jennings and some other family members got serious about the matter, and they set about trying to document their findings. They made plaster of Paris impressions of the tracks, bagged up the hair samples, and even took photographs. As well, Mrs. Frederick provided a detailed write-up about her encounter, which she shared with the Air Force as well as UFO researchers Jacques Vallée and Ted Phillips. No surprise, the Air Force replied with their favorite go-to explanation, a weather balloon. And that was it. Case closed. Despite asking for it back, the Air Force never returned the physical evidence they had collected. It was October 19, 2017. Seasoned truck driver Dan Murray, pseudonym, was heading east along I-25 at approximately 2:30 a.m. He was just east of Casper, Wyoming, a mere 15 minutes out. That area is quite desolate. The road was a long stretch of blackness that seemed to last forever. As he drove, in between sips of Pepsi, Murray chatted on his radio with his co-worker in South Dakota. As he went to take another swig, he looked up from the cup and saw what resembled a human standing in the road, in between the yellow line and the edge of the pavement. The figure stood up straight after bending at the waist, and Murray initially only saw its back and right side. It wasn't phased at all as he passed, Murray noted, not like deer or antelope would be, which he found somewhat concerning. He's seen enough animals in his years of driving to know they have a pattern, an innate response built in. and this one definitely wasn't following it. As Murray sped by, he saw that the creature was, quote, all gray, flat, medium, dull gray. Given its extreme height, his initial thought was that he was looking at a person on stilts, and reasoned that it was only a week out from Halloween, though something about what he was looking at felt unnatural. Murray would later confide in his friend, as well as the National UFO Reporting Center, where he filed his report, that he doubted that it was somebody pulling a prank. It would have been an incredibly hard and dangerous stunt to pull off, and to what end? It was pitch black and in the middle of nowhere. In his Nuforc report, Murray emphasized the creature's height, noting that it was tall, very tall. He added that when he went by, he could see the creature's left hand and arm shoot up into the air. To him, the hand looked, quote, clumpy and blurry, but he assumed it was due to the speed he was moving. I got the worst hair-raising chills ever in my life, he said. They were pulsing and in waves, with every hair on my body standing up for about 10 minutes. And that's just not me. This scared the crap out of me. The whole sighting lasted, Murray estimates, around 11 seconds. He contemplated turning around and going back so he could take a picture of the creature. He contemplated a lot of things, but ultimately he felt it best just to keep going and put the creature as far behind him as he could. His friend on the radio, whom he was confiding in the moment, also advised against it, noting that the most he had to protect himself was a knife, per company policy. In hindsight, Murray wishes he had a dash cam running, or that he would have known so he could have recorded it. But it all happened so fast. Writer Angelica Leicht would write of this case in her Buckrail news site article titled Weird Wyo. It remains unclear exactly what Dan Murray encountered out on that lonely road in Casper, but he should count himself lucky that he was in a truck and not on foot.